please join me in welcoming Speaker Joe Straus.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. President, thank you very much. Those are nice introductions. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Evan.
Speaker, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, welcome.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, always.
So we are 3 weeks from the most interesting election I suspect that any of us have ever seen. Maybe we'll never see one like it again. And it's customary at moments like this, so close to an election, to ask people like you for your thoughts about what we just saw. I'm curious to know what you make of the result. What does it say about our country? What does it say about our state?
Well, it was I can say with a lot of confidence, it was an election that I'm sure everyone is glad to have behind us.
Sure.
It was a statement by the American people, I think, that they didn't want more disappointment from Washington. They didn't want more of the same, and they're certainly not going to get that. But it was an unfortunate campaign in many ways.
Yep.
On both sides and all sides, and the sour mood of the public, having two pretty unpopular candidates nominated, wasn't great for the country. But there's hope now that the election's over, and fortunately it is.
Yep.
Now it's time to govern, and that's true for the president-elect and all those in the Congress. It's also true for those of us in the states.
He was not your guy, right? We don't want to look back, we want to look forward today, but he was not your guy.
Well, my guy was Jeb Bush.
Right.
And after Jeb dropped out in early March, I guess it was.
Yeah.
I went back and focused on where I really should be anyway, and that's down ballot at the legislative level, not only in Texas helping protect our Republican incumbents in the Texas House, but also leading a national organization called the Republican Legislative Campaign Committee, which had an outstanding cycle in this volatile year. So I stayed out of the presidential campaign and didn't comment on it. Didn't matter. I'm not very good at picking presidential candidates, as it appears. So I'm not sure anybody was too disappointed that I wasn't with them.
But Mr. Speaker, clearly the choice that was made, we had the opportunity to have a legislative session against the backdrop of a Trump presidency or a Clinton presidency. You believed, or maybe I should ask, do you believe that we are better off for the outcome than the alternative?
Well, I think the opportunities are enormous. As we've seen since Election Day, the president-elect seems to be somewhat flexible, and as he puts together a cabinet, there's already been a couple of interesting choices. One that should, or very well could, impact our state healthcare situation, with Congressman Price being named yesterday.
Right.
That's been a real issue when the state and the current administration have been at loggerheads on so many issues. There's a real opportunity, I think. Michael McCall today, Congressman McCall is interviewing for a position, maybe Homeland Security.
Meeting with the president-elect today.
That would be enormously helpful, I think, for Texas in terms of border security and having somebody who understands Texas and our border.
So you think the president-elect should pick McCall? You are for McCall in this case?
Well, I don't want to jinx him, but
well, your track record is so great.
It'd be good
right?
for Texas, yeah. It'd be good for Texas.
Right. So I want to come to the Obamacare or Affordable Care Act question specifically in a second, because as you say, there is the potential for a different path now with a new president. But more broadly, you talked about the loggerheads. We've been at loggerheads with the federal government. We have sued the federal government, as you know, more than any other state. Is that now going to stop? Are we now going to just stand down on our hostility to Washington and to the federal government? Now that a Republican administration is in, will we stop suing the federal government?
Well, I would expect there would be fewer instances where we felt that was necessary. I hope that's the case. And I think...
So we're suddenly going to like Washington now? All of a sudden now our position is going to be we're going to embrace Washington?
I'm not saying that at all. It's up to Washington to perform. And that's where I was going. So we get so obsessed with the presidency. And when there's a presidential election, it's 2 years of nothing but that.
Right.
A lot of important races down ballot. And I don't mean very far down ballot. There were a lot of U.S. Senate races this year that surprised people, where Republicans were able to hold on to the U.S. Senate, able to hold on to the United States House, and as I mentioned earlier, an incredibly successful year at the legislative level. So all politics and all government doesn't happen in the executive branch, and it shouldn't.
Right.
So I'm somewhat optimistic. We'll see how it goes. There's a lot to be proven.
Right.
But the American people were very angry at Washington, understandably so, year after year after year of inaction. There are no excuses now. Republicans in the White House, Republicans in the U.S. Senate, Republicans in the Congress, and Republicans in the states, in the capitals, in the legislatures, and the governor's offices.
Right.
We need to perform. We need to focus on
You
solving
guys own
problems.
that now, right? You own it.
We own it.
And the Pottery Barn rule's in effect. You broke it, you bought it, right?
That's right. No, that's you ask for the responsibility, you got to deliver.
Right. So the Affordable Care Act is one of a couple different issues that play out in an interesting way against the backdrop of a Trump administration as opposed to a Clinton administration. You know that the state speaker has the most people without health insurance in the entire country. If there is some sort of a repeal or replace, what are you going to replace it with? I feel like over the last couple of years, Texas has been excellent at telling us what they don't like, but less good at telling us what they do like. So now tell us what you do like, assuming now that you get back that money you've been asking for from Washington, or there's some repeal and replace in place. What's that going to look like for the people of the state of Texas?
Well, Texas has been asking for flexibility in the Medicaid program, for instance, and haven't really gotten anywhere with that.
Right.
There's an opportunity, I think, I hope, there needs to be, with whatever happens to Obamacare. My hunch is that it won't be completely dismantled or quickly dismantled, but smartly, piece by piece, can be. But on the Medicaid side, I think maybe flexibility. We've been asking at the state level for block granting, and some flexibility in designing a program that'll work for our people. So I hope we get that opportunity.
Do you have I guess that's my question. Do you have a program? Let's assume you get that money back. I just keep wondering if you all have a program in a drawer someplace, you've been just waiting to pull it out when you get the money back.
Well, I'll tell you what I feel good about is that Congressman Kevin Brady is going to be in a key position to help us. Former member of the Texas House of Representatives.
Right, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee of the Congress.
Yes, so I think having a more constructive dialogue with Washington can help us as we develop that.
But you don't have as it stands, Mr.
Well,
Speaker,
today
you don't have a plan right now.
Well, we can't yet until the new administration takes place and we see where they're going, what the Congress is willing to do. But we do have a plan to work with them to try to make it better.
Right. On border security, Mr. Speaker, this is another flashpoint in our political universe. Last session, you know, the legislature appropriated $800 million for border security funding, in large part because what came from both sides of the legislature was, we're not satisfied that the federal government is doing its job. But now you got your guys in there. They say they're going to do their jobs. There is open discussion of reducing or possibly zeroing out border security funding in the state budget because now you got your guys in there, they're theoretically going to take care of this. What's your read on where we're headed on this specific issue against the backdrop of a Trump presidency?
I'll tell you what we cannot do. We cannot keep virtually doubling the border security budget to the state of Texas every 2 years, which is pretty much what we've done the last
DPS is already asking for more money in the next budget, we think, than this budget.
That's right. It's time to go the other way. It's time for the federal government to assume their responsibility of border security. I'm confident that they certainly get that. I think a lot of the campaigning done by the president-elect was on that issue, and I think that his administration is going to have to perform.
So when he builds that wall, we can just zero out border security funding?
I don't know that it's related to the wall, but I do think that border security in whatever form it takes is going to be a more serious concern of this administration.
Right.
And anything that can alleviate the Texas budget from a job that we shouldn't be having to do in the first place.
Right.
I'm strongly supportive.
So if we're heading into a tight budget, we'll get to the tightness of the budget in the next 2 years. We can expect reasonably that the amount of money that the legislature appropriates will be less than last time, not more.
I would certainly hope so, and I would be supportive of that.
Yeah. This election, not only, as you correctly say, was not just about a president. We had elected a lot of people down ballot. You know, in Texas, things don't change very much, and you had a couple of R's became D's in the Texas House. 5, there's one that's still potentially out there, but really you're still going to have a 60% Republican majority in the House. You have a near supermajority in the Senate. I look at this legislature and I think it looks pretty much like the last legislature. At the top level, at the biggest picture level, what's going to be different in this legislature than last legislature after this election? It kind of seems like the same thing.
Well, the Texas House changes every session. We've got some new members in here. I saw Kevin Roberts earlier.
Correct.
This is a big week, by the way, in the Texas House. Today, our beautiful Christmas tree from Denison, Texas arrives. Also want to remember to pay a tribute, especially at this time of year, to Nell Delaney, who started the Christmas tree ornament project that's raised a lot of money for renovations to the Texas House and to our Capitol. I'd invite all of you to come to the chamber, which has been renovated. Julie, my wife, works hard on it. And this week is orientation week for the 28 new members of the House. So it isn't going to be exactly the same House as the last time. I agree with you that the overall makeup hasn't changed a lot. Right. We've gone from 99 Republicans to 95. And I feel good about the team we have. Yeah. I feel always good about the new blood that comes in. Of the 28, I think 4 have been members before.
I guess, Mr. Speaker,
but there's turnover, and you never know until you get that 150 people in the room together what the chemistry is going to be like. But I'm confident we have a good group, and we've had, I think, a pretty successful last several terms working together the way we like to build the culture in the House, so I'm pretty optimistic going forward.
But we're in Albert Einstein territory here. You know, the definition of insanity is expecting a different outcome when you do the same thing over and over.
Well, I thought you were going to call us geniuses.
No, but the reality, Mr. Speaker, respectfully, is that that this legislature is going to be so similar to previous legislatures that it would be insanity to expect that something different is likely to occur on some of these core issues. What we've seen in the last couple of sessions. Am I wrong to assume that there's not going to be much difference? The House is not going to suddenly do a 180 on many of the issues on which it's weighed in the last couple sessions.
Well, no, but we've also done some really good work the last few sessions.
Right.
In education, and transportation, water, a lot of other areas too. So we have been addressing a lot of problems that face the state. Not all of them. There's a lot that I'd like to get to this session. Yeah. But I don't think it's going to be a replay of everything you've seen before. And I think you'll see a commitment to new issues. And again, with the new start in Washington, D.C., I think there's an opportunity to address a lot of challenges that have been addressed to some degree, but not enough.
Well, let me press you on some of those specifically in the time we have, because obviously, you know, the Lieutenant Governor has been quite clear about his priorities on the Senate side. He's enumerated a list of 10, and then a second list of 10. I gather there's going to be a third list of 10. He's showed us his. You haven't exactly showed us yours, right? So you operate differently than the Lieutenant Governor does. You know, You've given a couple speeches in which you've talked in broad terms about your priorities. We understand what his priorities are. I want to understand better. We want to understand better what yours are. So talk to us about the things on your list.
My first priority is to do a good job earning the trust of the members of the Texas House now that I've been reelected by my district back home. Yeah. And I have a very different job than the Lieutenant Governor has. He's a statewide elected official. He's not technically in the legislative branch. I'm a House member on the first day of the session. Yep. Until I'm elected, hopefully, by the majority of the House members. So I don't think it's appropriate, certainly, you know, admissible, but I don't think it's appropriate for a speaker to have a hard-driving, lengthy agenda of specifics. Now, generally, I think people know that I'm for limited government, but effective government. I'm for addressing education issues and higher education issues and infrastructure and water. A couple of new things on the agenda this session, I hope, is to address child protective services and foster care. Right. Seeing a lot about that. The House has been working on that in this interim in a very constructive way. I was glad the governor came in with us, and the Lieutenant Governor, by the way, in asking the new commissioner to come up with a plan that the House is supporting. And mental health care is an issue that we have addressed with money in the last session, but I don't think we addressed or understood that there's a lot more than money involved in the coordination of mental health care. And that is an agenda item that Price has chaired a select committee that I named during the interim. Has done some outstanding work. We've had 7 or 8 really substantive hearings, and I'm excited about seeing their report. I think that coordinating better across agency lines, listening to those on the front lines in our local communities and law enforcement and healthcare, obviously, and education areas is going to bring more synergies, more efficiencies, and hopefully earlier interventions in what can be acute situations and leading to tragedies.
Now, these are the things you care about.
Those are things I care about a lot, and I think all Texans should do. Right. And there are others as well. So I don't have 30 specific bills and have assigned House members to carry them. That's not the way the House works.
You don't begrudge him doing that on the Senate?
No, not at all. That's his job, the way he sees to do it, and the way the senators apparently approve. I think the House members would string me up if I said, "Here's your bill, pass it."
Right.
And the way we work is that we're all sworn in as House members. One of us is elected Speaker of the House. We pass rules, which could change. Then there's an organizational period of the 150 people into whatever the rules call for. And then we go through a deliberative process of the bill filing and considering those bills in committee, and we work through the work.
So it's necessarily different than the other side.
It's very different,
I get
yes.
that.
Yeah.
The foster care piece, which you alluded to, we say often that there are very few truly bipartisan issues in the legislature at the moment. This is one where there seems to be general agreement, although the House and the Senate are on different sides on this. As I understand, while there's general agreement about the need to remake the foster care system, the specifics of it are not yet agreed upon. House has one perspective in terms of the order of the priorities. Senate has the other. Where are we going to end up here? Where should we end up here?
Well, I think we ought to end up on moving forward as quickly as we can.
Right.
More
caseworkers?
More caseworkers, better pay.
Yeah.
And move forward with that when we're ready, but with accountability. And I want to comment for a moment about something you said about this being a bipartisan unifying effort. And it's been very gratifying for me to see our working group in the House of very diverse members,
right.
Republicans and Democrats, and from across the spectrum, working together very cooperatively, working together very diligently toward these solutions. And I think they'll work even more, more together and more cooperatively during the session, not just this period now where there's been a kind of an early intervention and a plan that I hope we can act on soon.
Yeah, and you expect this will happen?
I do, it should.
This is one issue related to kids that has been in the news of late. I get my news by reading the Texas Tribune. So I actually read.
I understand a lot of us do.
I read yesterday on the Texas Tribune website that the state is quietly moving forward with the cuts, the Medicaid cuts, therapy for disabled children. You all going to go ahead with this? On the one hand, the legislature is saying we need to be compassionate, we need to take care of these kids. We're going to overhaul the foster care system. But then on the other side of this, the state is proceeding with these cuts that a lot of people think is sending the exact opposite message in terms of the state's compassion to kids in need. You really going to go forward with this?
Well, let me say that I believe the approach was well-intentioned. It did not work, and it will be addressed in our supplemental budget.
What does that mean exactly?
It means that maybe we made a mistake. I don't think it was ill-intentioned. It was not a initiative of the Texas House, and I think you'll see us address it.
You intend to call a do-over here?
You could call it that. We'll call it trying to improve the policy.
Are you going to get agreement in the Senate? Are you going to get agreement out of the governor's office? Will you be able to orchestrate some kind of a do-over or whatever you choose to call it with the agreement of all the other principals?
I think we can. We have to sort out all the facts, look at it, see what a better alternative is, but I think it'll be addressed.
Okay. Let me ask you about public education. You again put education, and I know you were talking about public and higher ed both, but let me talk about public education specifically, at the near top of your own list of priorities, and I expect that many of your members share that perspective. We had a Supreme Court decision a couple months back that said, in essence, that the school finance system of the state is really, 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 really bad, just not bad enough for them to do anything about it. And so they've kicked it back to you all. What's that look like? What does it mean that you all now have responsibility for this? What are you going to do? What can you do?
Well, you noticed who didn't celebrate that decision? Me.
No, you didn't. In fact, you've talked openly about the need to come up with a fix.
Yes, and it made the job harder, frankly.
Would you have preferred to have a gun to your head institutionally?
Well, nobody wants an unconstitutional system, but it would have made it easier politically, which is why I stressed during the interim that we need to address school finance in a serious way.
Do you think your members agree with that? Were there members who know that they should have voted to support funding of public education in a different way, but just could not do it politically?
Well, they did fund it in a better way last session.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much better as some of us would have liked.
Yeah.
But we did make progress. And I think going forward, it's very important for members to be in tune with their own districts. listen to their school districts. One of the issues I've been stressing is the proliferation of Robin Hood, of recapture.
You live in a recapture district yourself, right?
I live in
Represent
one of the original ones.
Yeah.
And we don't love it. But we've been joined by a lot of other districts now that were never intended to be in the recapture system. Look at that vote in Houston the other day.
Yep.
75% economically disadvantaged students, and yet they're in a property wealthy district. Dallas, I think, is headed that way.
Right.
Austin is the biggest in the state, hundreds of millions of dollars in recapture payments.
Right.
They're not what most people would consider highly wealthy demographically. So there's lots of districts across this state. I think the members need to tune in, and I'm sure they are,
Yep.
to their local districts to listen to the districts and what they're struggling with. If we do nothing, it will become truly a crisis that we'll be responsible for. And that's why I've made it a core priority. Again, no help from the Supreme Court. I'm not competent to judge on constitutional grounds, but on political grounds, they certainly didn't make the job easier.
But Mr. Speaker, you talk to members, both parties, but specifically Republican members who are in the majority, and you ask, is there going to be more money for public education? Against the backdrop of a tighter budget this time than last time.
Yeah.
And as often as not, the answer you hear is no. And the reason you hear no is they're not satisfied that money is the issue, that we can fix what ails our public schools without simply pouring a whole bunch of money. They view it, they don't say these words, I do, but the characterization is, I think, fair. It's throwing a good money after bad or bad money after worse. They don't think that we're spending the money that we're giving public ed well now.
Well, some people feel that way.
You don't feel that way.
Others don't.
Do you feel that way?
No, I don't. But I do feel that money in education should come with accountability.
Right.
And so I'm not just for throwing money at the problem, but I am for keeping more money that's generated locally in local districts.
Right. You have the stomach to orchestrate or to preside over a House that orchestrates a massive school finance fix in this session?
Stomach?
Yeah. You have the
It's an
stomach for it?
unfair question after Thanksgiving, but
Well, you know what I'm saying. There are people who've already suggested that maybe this is too big. I mean, the lieutenant governor seems to have said one thing, and then he's now said, well, I actually didn't say that. But there was the prospect raised, at least in an interview that the Midland paper published, in which he said this may be too big an issue, too complicated an issue to deal with during a session in which we have other complicated issues. Maybe we need to do it outside of a regular session.
Well, I do think we need to make progress. I'm not expecting a miracle.
Right.
But if we don't make progress, I think that a lot of political calculations for those people that you mentioned who say that spending on education is wasteful and unnecessary, I think they may go home and find that not addressing this may be more problematic than addressing it.
That the voters shake their fists at
They
them.
should.
Right. When I asked the lieutenant governor a couple of weeks ago before the Greater Houston Partnership about this question of a big school finance fix, what he said was if we're going to fix public education, we have to include school choice in the bucket of things that we do. And we got to a point in the conversation where it was clear to me that he was linking the two, and I said to him, are you suggesting, Lieutenant Governor, no one without the other, no school finance fix without school choice? And he said, no one without the other. School choice has not been a popular topic in the Texas House, at least as it's come over from the Senate the last couple of sessions.
Yeah, it depends on what you mean by school choice.
Right.
School choice is very popular, I think, across the board if you're talking about school choice within a district, maybe even some cases where it crosses district lines. Charter schools, form of choice.
So there's a
a
continuum of school choice.
Yeah, and I think we ought to keep an open mind about all that.
Right.
But if the focus of the session becomes on vouchers, then there could be some trouble in the House. Historically, the House has not been all that friendly to vouchers.
In fact, you couldn't even get a vote on the bill that came over from the Senate last time, if I'm recalling, right?
Yeah, the appetite hadn't been there. Could change.
Right.
Got 28 new members coming in. I did ask for the committee to take a look at all types of school choice this interim. So we'll see where we are.
You'll listen.
Of course we'll listen. We listen to everything in the House. I don't fear, I don't fear voices that don't agree with me. I think I invite everybody to participate in the House and everybody in Texas to come testify. The best laws you can pass are the ones where everybody has a voice. You get all of the facts on the table, and then you make the best decisions you can.
So the perception, Mr. Speaker, that you are personally opposed to school choice of the sort that comes from the Senate, and therefore you are going to use your rules or your power as presiding officer to ensure that such a bill never gets to the floor of the House. That is an inaccurate characterization of your power or point of view.
I think a better way to put it in terms of the past several sessions is that as a presiding officer of the House, I have a responsibility to do what the House members want me to do.
Right.
And and I have had a pretty good finger on the pulse of the members of the House. So things could change, have an open mind. I'm not going to negotiate any school bills today with the Senate, or what they're going to pass to us, or what we may pass to them.
But your belief is that if the bill does not pass, it will not pass, or does not get a vote, it will not get a vote, because the members don't support it.
Yeah, that's right. If the members support it and I stand in the way, then I wouldn't be Speaker today, or Speaker very long.
Right, okay. I've alluded a couple times to the tightness of the budget. We live now in a 2-year budget that was $209.4 billion, the largest budget in the history of the state of Texas. We know that the price of oil is down around the upper 40s. We're in the 40s today, compared to close to $100 two years ago as we sit here. You're going to have less money to spend. There's no question about that.
No question about it.
Right. So if you had $209.4 billion last time, and you have a couple billion fewer in the next budget, what are you not going to spend on next time that you spent on this time?
Well, we'll see.
Surely you have an idea.
Well, I have some ideas, but not enough to fill the bucket. But I go back to my first session as Speaker when I was elected in 2009. We went into that session with an unexpected budget shortfall. It was announced on the first day of the session. Forgotten the number now, but it was several $1 billion we weren't expecting.
Yep.
And we didn't know how we were going to scramble and put together a budget then. That was President Obama's first year in office. He had a horrible idea called a stimulus bill that I and others didn't support, but it passed. And to their credit, we were able to work with members from the other side of the aisle and find creative ways to backfill some of our problems in Texas. So with a new administration coming in, with a lot of states that are in much worse fiscal condition than Texas is, let's keep an open mind. Let's see what happens. Sure, we got to be prepared to make some sacrifices in the budget. We've done it before. I don't think it'll be as difficult as it was in 2011 when we had almost a $20 billion shortfall, but it is going to be significant. And absent some developments and some facilitation between our friends and new friends in Washington and us, it is going to be tough.
But the leftover money that you'll have available to you when you come in this time is going to be used up pretty quickly.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
One difference between this time and last time or previous times is that there's not going to be money left over once you've done all your supplementals.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not a Pollyanna about this.
Right.
It is going to be a very difficult budget session. It'll be our most difficult task, is passing a balanced budget in a way that funds our basic priorities.
Right.
This state is growing twice as fast as the rest of the country. It continues to.
Right.
The revenues aren't keeping up with that growth.
Puts a stress on the resources you have available.
Yeah, 75,000 new students in our public schools every year.
Or more, right, yeah.
And more cars on our roads. And
right.
It's a very demanding population as we grow this fast.
If
revenues aren't keeping up.
If you won't tell me what you're not going to spend money on, tell me whether you think you can afford to cut taxes. The last session, part of the state's decision at budget time was to do a little bit less than $4 billion in total in tax relief. Some said when they saw the price of oil fall subsequently, boy, I wonder if we would have done that if we knew then what we know now. Well, now you do know now what you know now. So going into the next session...
But we don't know everything now that we should know now.
But so going into the next session, knowing what the price of oil is likely to be, knowing you're going to have less money to spend, and knowing that the priorities of this fast-growing state, as you yourself say, are getting more, not less, and more complicated, not less complicated, you have enough money to spend on property tax cuts. You have enough money to spend on business tax cuts. Can you do the next session what you did this last session?
We'll have to wait and see. It's too early to tell. We like tax relief in the Texas House, and we do it where we can. I don't know whether we can this next time. But I am happy that we cut the business margins tax by 25% last session.
You plan to come back and do it again? I mean, the lieutenant governor has said, and I believe even in the interim charges that you yourself put out, looking at whether you could reduce the tax burden on businesses was something that you were interested in doing.
I'd be delighted if we could.
Yeah. Not a complete elimination, but a phase-out if you do it.
I'd love to eliminate it, but I'm not expecting it right now.
You understand the hole that it would create, right?
Of course.
If you got rid of the whole thing.
Yes, I'm not saying we're going to, but I'd like to, and that's I think, a good goal.
Mr. Speaker, the lieutenant governor, in his enumeration of his priorities, made his property tax relief effort the second bill with the second lowest bill number. It was SB 2. It was before bathrooms. I mean, if you know, If you look, if you want to
Oh, we had to
understand,
get to that, didn't
if
we?
you want to understand a man's heart, look to his list of legislative priorities. The lieutenant governor obviously believes that property tax relief is more important than anything other than passing a balanced budget. You don't share his enthusiasm for property tax relief at that same level?
No, I'm enthusiastic about property tax relief if we can do it in a way that that is thoughtful, and it'll be interesting to see. It's all the more reason to take a good look at school finance.
Yeah.
Because most of the property taxes paid are to school districts.
Those things are related.
They are very related.
If you orchestrate a relief of property taxes on property tax at the local level, but you don't actually put money into public education at the state level, ultimately it's a net negative for public education.
That's a better way of saying it.
Right. Okay, well, you could have that one for free,
Yeah,
I
thank
guess.
you.
I don't understand. On this question of the differences between the Senate and the House, there is a lot of enthusiasm to ban sanctuary cities coming out of the Senate. I believe Senator Perry, former House member, has introduced a bill, and there's open discussion of this. And the governor, his own self, yesterday tweeted that he intended to sign such a bill into law, banning sanctuary cities. This was occasioned in part by comments made by the then candidate for sheriff of Travis County, who said, I think she's backed off on this a little bit, that she intended to make this a true sanctuary city. This is obviously a federal conversation as well as a state conversation.
Yes.
Is a sanctuary city bill going to find open arms in the Texas House this session?
Well, a constructive one will.
What does that mean?
It means listening to law enforcement around the state. It means listening to local communities about their concerns.
Yep.
It means about being careful of what the words are in the bill.
Yep.
And but we've passed sanctuary cities legislation in the past, and I'm sure the right bill will pass again.
The opponents of this bill have said, among other things, that they believe it opens the door to racial profiling. What do you think about that?
Well, that's where I say you have to be careful in what the words are.
Right.
What it calls for. Let's look at the federal policies on this too. There's a lot of promises been made in this election. So we'll work through it. I think it's important that that we observe immigration laws.
Yep.
And to my knowledge, it may not be as widespread a problem as some people may think it is. But we'll get the facts out there. We'll talk to people in local communities and get our arms around it and try to do a responsible job of that issue.
Let me ask you about E-Verify. Over the last day or so, there was a lot of talk about a stepped-up E-Verify effort on the state's behalf. Senator Schwertner from Georgetown introduced a bill yesterday that would obligate state contractors to use an E-Verify system. I thought it was interesting that it was only state contractors, not private businesses, just state contractors. What I understand is his perspective on this was, let's have the state put its money where its mouth is first in terms of this. I mean, I'm moved to ask the broader question. The state seems very happy to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on border security. I'd like to know what the state is doing to reduce the unquenchable demand for undocumented labor. And what is the state prepared to do? What is the state prepared to do to punish employers who hire undocumented persons on their at their businesses? I know what you're doing on the border security side. What are you doing on the other side?
Well, we'll take a look at what he's proposing. I'm sure House members will have some good ideas too.
But this has not been without controversy in the past.
No.
Right?
No, but a lot of private employers today, when E-Verify first became a topic,
right,
it was a new program, and apparently it had some problems with it, as I recall. It may be, I'm speaking out of my depth here because I'm no expert, but it may be worth taking a look at. And I think the whole area of state contracting is one that needs more attention than it even got last time. Yeah. In the last session, we did some tightening up on state contracting, and not just on the immigration or the hiring side, but just on transparency of contracts and conflicts of interest in contracts and making sure contractors perform the way they should. I think we'll get another look.
So having nothing really to do,
but
you mean it in a more broad sense. You don't necessarily mean specifically related to immigration.
So many billions of dollars of taxpayer money is spent through contracting that it does deserve a very, very deep focus.
So again, just to come back to this joint or related sanctuary cities, E-Verify, that bucket of issues. Again, this is a case where on the street people say, well, the Senate will race to pass this stuff. It'll get over to the House, and it will not find any welcome arms open in the House. You actually, you think that both of those bills have a possible chance of getting a...
I'm not ruling any bill out. We don't start for a few weeks, but... And don't forget, the House passes bills too.
Correct.
We're just maybe not as quick to form as the Senate is. They get going a lot faster than we do.
It's absolutely true that you passed things that went over to the Senate and didn't necessarily get any more of a welcome embrace over there too.
Yeah, I mean, you have to realize when when members give birth to bills, most of them aren't going to live.
Right.
That's the sad fact of life. That's why we put new carpet in the House chamber this year.
I'm not entirely sure where this is going, but okay.
There are a lot of tears.
A lot of people on the ground crying and wailing.
That's right.
Okay, so is the Women's Privacy Act, as the Lieutenant Governor refers to the so-called bathroom bill, going to get a warm reception in the House? Again, that's another one where there seems to be enthusiasm on the Senate side for this. There are certainly some House members who agree with the Senate on this. But the question is whether the Senate will be receptive to such a bill. What do you think? I mean, will the House be receptive to such a bill?
Well, excuse the expression, but this isn't the most urgent concern of mine. And I'm not hearing, my district isn't really communicating with me on this as an urgent concern.
It's not on your list of priorities.
It isn't, but it doesn't mean the House isn't going to feel differently than I do. What I do hear from my part of the state, my part of the county, is concern that, say, San Antonio, excited about hosting the Final Four in 2018.
2018, that's right.
We don't want to do anything that jeopardizes that. I mean, well, listen, I know the Lieutenant Governor is very enthusiastic about this idea. You know, let him run with it. We'll see what the House wants to do.
But Mr. Speaker, you know, in your very nice and very gentle way, you are throwing shade on the Lieutenant Governor with this. Are you not? I mean, that's...
I'm not. Listen.
Come on.
I'm not the one out there talking about it. You asked.
Right, I did ask. But you're saying that it's not urgent translates into, it sounds to me like you're not into this bill. You're just not into this bill.
Well, it isn't on my priority list, but it may be of the House members. We'll see. Jason Isaac yesterday, I saw I had a big press conference at one of his schools. He's exercised about it. Some others may be too. We'll see. I'm speaking for myself here.
Right.
I'm speaking, I think, also for the business community in Texas. Speaking for my community.
Business community has not been super enthusiastic about this bill. Again, not monolithic to say
the least. Yeah. And I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know what the bill is. I don't know what's going to be in it. Let's look at the details.
Right.
But if it creates a situation as North Carolina went through, my enthusiasm level would not be high for that.
Okay. Let me. We're going to take a couple questions for the speaker here in a second. There's a microphone in the front. If you have one, make your way up to the microphone. I'm going to ask the speaker one last question myself, and then we'll bring you into this for the time that we have available. Mr. Speaker, what's going to become of you? My colleague Ross Ramsey wrote a column.
Wow.
Let's get all existential.
Right yet. But
my colleague Ross Ramsey wrote a column yesterday talking about you and the speaker's job, and said that there has been some talk, as you know, on the street, maybe this will be the last time that you are speaker, or that this is the last time you serve in the House. Maybe you'll decide to come back for all time. We don't yet know. Have you thought about
that I'll rule out.
Yeah, not forever. But have you thought about the future? Have you thought about whether this is your last time as speaker or your last term in the House? Have you given a thought to what happens next?
You know, I take these one at a time, and I always have.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I was elected unexpectedly to the position, there were people speaking for me saying that I had committed to only one term.
Never happened.
That certainly wasn't true.
Right.
And I always give advice to other members, especially the senior members of the House who talk at the end of a session when they're tired.
Yep.
And are disappointed about a lot of things. They say they're going to retire. I always tell them, stop. Don't do it now. Go home. Reconnect with your family.
It's like going to the supermarket when you're hungry.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it is sort of.
Yeah.
But it's a good idea to focus, and I've always tried to focus on the job at hand, not another job somewhere else, not another political office, and not another election cycle until you've done a good job in this one. So I make no promises one way or the other.
Yeah.
I won't do it forever. I've been privileged to serve for 4 terms now in the House as the presiding officer. I'm asking for a 5th. I feel pretty confident that'll happen. But I take nothing for granted.
Yeah.
And it's a real privilege to serve while I'm there. And as long as the people in District 121 are happy with my service, and the members of the House feel that they can do their jobs effectively and help them when they go home, then I don't have any immediate plans to step down.
Do you have any aspirations to do anything else should the opportunity present? If, you know, when Chief Justice Cruz packs up for Washington and there's a Senate seat open, you have any interest in doing something like that?
Again, I don't spend a lot of time daydreaming about other political jobs. This is not one that I had really thought I'd be in.
Right.
And so my whole approach to politics and public service is built on my experience as a very young man being a devoted fan of George Herbert Walker Bush. In my mind, the really essence of public service. And so wherever you can contribute that makes sense and works out with your family life, you ought to do it.
He's your model. I get that.
Yeah.
Okay. We have time maybe for one or two questions if anybody wants to ask one. And there's microphones, like I say. Sir, go ahead.
I have a question. My name is Steve West. I'm CFO at Georgetown ISD.
Yes, sir.
As you were talking about public education and accountability, one of the concerns that we all face is the fact that the playing field is not always level when you compare public education charters and private schools. And so we would like to be treated in the public education field similarly in terms of when we're judged by our performances or whatever and accountable. We would like the playing field level so that we're all playing by the same rules. And there's a disparity between the rules right now, and I just would like to leave that thought with you and like to hear your thoughts on
Thank you.
that subject.
That sounds reasonable and difficult to argue with.
Yeah,
Thank you. Come see us when we take testimony on bills you're interested in.
You agree with the premise that there is an unlevel playing field?
Well, I'm not going to argue with the man when I don't know the facts of his case, but,
Right.
but I'm certainly open to hearing more and want to hear more and agree that everyone should be treated fairly at the table and that the playing field should be level.
Okay. Other questions for the speaker? Opportunity if you've got one. You want to jump up here? Sir.
Myself, I guess. Given the international trade agenda of the president-elect, where do you see international trade for Texas, especially considering the NAFTA partners?
Right.
And what are your expectations or your hopes for the future?
Do you have any concerns about the Trump trade agenda as it relates to a state like Texas, for
Yes.
which trade is a significant piece of our economy?
Absolutely, yes. I have a lot of concerns about the rhetoric during the campaign. But let's see what he really means. I've seen some flexibility already in what he said after the election than compared to what he said during it. I know how important trade with Mexico is. I know how important trade between Canada, the United States, and Mexico is. I was a young man in the first Bush administration when the NAFTA treaty agreement was being negotiated. I believe in free trade, and I think that the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see what this administration really does. If it's limited to maybe renegotiating certain parts of the trade agreements, I think that's appropriate. If it really is a wholesale ransacking of free trade agreements and becoming insular as a country, impacting Texas, I think, in a very negative way, would be something that Senator Cornyn and our congressional leadership would stand up against. So I'm not expecting the worst, hoping for the best. We ought to keep an eye on it because free trade and our relationship with Mexico is incredibly, incredibly important to Texas.
Okay. Ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I'm kind of short. I have to put this onto my level.
I can see it.
You're good.
Speak up.
My name is Rebecca Hucker, and I'm from Cedar Park. And you mentioned school choice earlier. If the House members express support for education savings accounts and a bill is passed in the Senate and it goes to the House, do you believe that there's a good chance of having that bill be passed? And would you personally support it if there is such an interest in the House to make sure that ESAs are available in Texas, especially for students who are in special ed that could benefit from more school choice options?
Question for the people in the back is whether the speaker believes that if an education savings accounts bill came over from the Senate and there was support of members of the House, does he believe that such a bill would pass, and would he personally support such a bill?
Well, it would certainly be considered and will be. We'll look at anything that passes over, or obviously that we pass out of the House. But education savings accounts or any kind of taxpayer-funded education for private education needs to come with accountability. And there are a lot of details and a lot of difficult details to work through before I can say, yes, we would, or no, we wouldn't look at something favorably. But we're open-minded. We look at the facts, see what can be negotiated, what is good for the education system and good for the young people of the state.
We talked about the continuum, Mr. Speaker, on school choice, that you know, you said, well, I'm not really for a voucher program. The reality is that even back from a voucher program, there are still ways in which taxpayer dollars, directly or indirectly, would enable more choices. And you're saying that you're concerned, just to be sure, that if taxpayer dollars are used directly or indirectly, there would have to be adequate accountability for you to be supportive of it.
That's correct.
Right. Okay, very good. All right,
I would say that about any taxpayer expenditure.
on school choice or any other issue.
anything, yeah.
Right. I'm being told that we're out of time. In order to stay on our schedule today, we're so grateful to the speaker for coming over and spending time with us and giving us his perspective. Please give him a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We will be back to you with our next program in a couple of minutes, and we're going to start on time, so stay close. Thanks very much.
Thank you.